Welcome to Make a Path Presents. My name is Ronnie Hayes, and today let's talk Making a Comic Part 2. Alright, real quick, if you're just starting this video and you haven't watched Part 1, hang tight, watch this, and then go watch Part 1 because it actually fits that way. Even though it's Part 1 and Part 2, it fits either way you watch them. Now, at the end of this video, we're going to talk about something that's, I think, is real important that I wasn't clear enough in Part 1, so it's probably better to just watch Part 2 and then watch Part 1. And if you have watched Part 1 already, finish this one and then go back and watch it again, because I really strongly feel that's a very helpful tip. And some people were a little confused. They thought I was talking about the finished product, you know, the final polished format. No, that's not it. We're talking about getting your panels organized right from the start when you're doing your rough draft. And now that I've looked over a couple other methods, I am in love more so than ever with the method I went over in Part 1. Absolutely love it. Now, what I think is really helpful is understanding the basics of a comic book. And even though the word basic, you know, you might think like you already know everything, but there's some things in here that I think are really important. So just hang in there and let's blow through some of these. Next, let's break down a comic book. And this is where I think it gets even more important. You have your cover, your back cover, and then the inside pages, which is the story. Now, the cover can also spill over onto the back, and that's called a wraparound cover. It doesn't always, but it's really cool when they do that. Now, inside the book, you're going to get usually 32 pages, and 22 of those pages will be story, and that's going to be your actual comic, and the other 10 pages are going to be saved for ads and your letter column. Now, when you put out your first comic, maybe your first 2 or 3 comics, you're usually going to talk about, or this is usually what I see, people will talk about what it's been like getting this comic to print, you know, or maybe what idea they had where they were then able to turn that into a comic. You could pretty much talk about whatever you want that has to relate to the comic. And then while you're doing that and the comic is getting more interest, people will send you letters. When you got enough letters and you're comfortable in starting a letter column, then you start putting letter columns in the back where those last 10 pages are. So you have your ads and your letter columns. And I believe you put, I think it's the regular thing to each person put their own unique name for the letter columns. Now, comic books are usually released once a month. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. Since the artwork is really time consuming, a lot of comic books, especially newer ones, newer titles, will release, you know, 2 or 3 issues, take a month off, maybe 2 months off, then they'll release, you know, 4 to 5 months in a row, 1 issue a month, and then they'll take another month or 2 off. However, on the other end of it, you'll see, like for The Walking Dead, for example, there's been a number of times in the past 2 to 3 years alone where they have consistently released 2 issues a month. For the All Out War, they did 2 issues a month for like 4 months in a row, I believe it was. So, you know, it's it depends on the title, it depends on the project, and it depends on the artist and everything else. So it can change up a little bit. Now let's talk about the cover. The cover doesn't always have to be an exact panel, an exact image from inside your comic. Your cover can be symbolic. Your cover can be an exact panel, an exact image. Your cover can also be a partial image, meaning if you had, you know, this cafeteria scene and you wanted it on the cover, maybe you would only include this one zombie and something else for the background. You know, not necessarily the entire image. I know for one of the issues, there's like a frozen walker on the ground and I think a blurry image of Rick walking through a blizzard, and inside the comic it was Dale who finds the frozen walker on the ground. So you can do partials like that. Also, like this issue number 1, you can kind of embody the whole theme of your story on the cover, and I think that this one does it really well, where it's borderline symbolic, but it more embodies the theme of this, a cop in a fallen or broken down world. And I think that is absolutely awesome. So the cover is, the cover is yours to have fun with. Now, I hope you didn't leave, but we're going to get into the most important stuff right now, and that is breaking down the inside here. Now, this is called a panel. Each block here essentially is going to be a panel. Panels can be different sizes. So right here we have a big panel, and then we got little ones, and we got 2 medium ones down here. So that's actually pretty perfect right here. I say big, but you can actually have one that covers half the page, and then that would be a bigger panel yet. Now, so you understand those are panels. Next is going to be called a borderless panel, and it is literally exactly what it sounds like. This is an image that's not restricted by any border. It's kind of just there. Here's another cool one. Oh, actually, right across the page right here, we have the hospital. That's also a borderless panel. I love borderless panels, but they have to be done right. Here's an iconic one from the comic. This is the bicycle girl in a borderless panel. Really iconic image. Next is your gutter, and that's going to be the white trim. I say trim, but don't get hung up on that word. The white around your these panels, that's your gutter. Next is going to be a splash page, and that's going to be a full page image. Now, I did hear technically this can be a splash page. It's very rare. I don't know, I read that somewhere. Next is called a spread. Now, a spread is, as you can tell, an image that takes up 2 pages. Now, I heard it can take up more than 2, and in that case, you actually pull it out as if it's a banner. But that's very uncommon. I don't think that's ever been done in The Walking Dead. I don't know. To me, that's a gimmick, if you got to pull it out. I have a cover from The Walking Dead that you pull it out, and I just call it a banner. But for a cover, it's cool. Inside the comic, I don't know. It's a little gimmicky. However, this is a spread right here, 2 pages. Next, we're going to talk about a cliffhanger. A cliffhanger is something that it's going to be your last image, your last scene, or your last bit of story. That's going to be in the very end. It's the last thing your reader reads, and it's usually something that leaves it on maybe a mystery, or maybe someone's injured and you think there's a chance they might die, in the next one, or somebody's facing danger. It could be somebody even confesses. It could be anything, but it leaves the reader wanting to know, oh shit, what's happening there? Not something that's so simply part of the story as if, we're getting ready to go to war and you see all of us just loading guns and then that's the end. That technically is the cliffhanger because it's the very last bit of story. But if they were getting ready to go for war, or go to war, sorry, and everyone's loading guns, and then you saw one of the guys who you don't know if he's really one of the good guys, pulls the pin on a grenade and maybe leaves it on the table when they're all loading up for war, that would be a totally different cliffhanger, because it's something where you need to see what's going to happen after that. You know what I mean? Different degrees of, how intense a cliffhanger is, basically. Alright, and the last thing I want to talk about, I wrote down this quick guide here. This is similar to what we were talking about yesterday. Now keep in mind, this is not the finished, polished format for a script, for a comic book. This is simply when you're sitting down to write your rough draft. Essentially, I started doing this from the very beginning. When I sit down and I'm writing and I'm putting that sucker together, I do my dots. I do a dot for every action scene. Essentially, something that's going to be every new image, I put a dot and I move on. So all these dots are new images, something new that's happening. Basically, the dot represents a panel. So if you look over here, what I did was each of these dots, what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panels. That means that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dots. These 5 dots are these 5 panels. And then for page 2, it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those 7 dots are the panels for page 2. And that is pretty much how I break it down in the very beginning. But why this is so important is because if you sit down and you just write out your story, let's say for issue 1, I sat down and I just wrote out my entire story. When you get to the end of that, you don't know how that's going to break out into panels. You have no clue. So you actually have to go back to your story and break it apart somehow. And you're looking at a page that's all words. Now I do know some people, especially if you're the writer and the artist, I think it might be a little easier because you can actually, I've seen artists that will write their story by doing like little blocks and little sketches and stick figures. But if you're let's say you're just a writer, or maybe you can be the writer and artist, but when you do it in this method, you're essentially putting your panels here from the start. So I can go back to my rough draft here, and let's say I want to get an idea of where I am with panels. I can take all my dots, count them out, put them in some kind of, based on, you have to look at what's going on in your story, based on what's going on in your story, and like this, I know I want a full image. So when I get down to that one, I know, okay, that's a full page. Sorry, full page I mean. So I know to break these apart into pages, that's going to be a full page, page 5. And then you can do that for your entire issue, and you know you have room to play with. You can even add panels. Say you have a scene and you're like, yeah, I want that scene to breathe a little. I want a little more going on. And you're like, you know what, I'm good because I only have 4 panels for this. I can expand on this scene. Then you can start shifting these around to push one. Let's say this image you want on a next page and you want it to be a splash. You can do that now because you have a clear idea of how many panels roundabout you're going to be putting into your comic. I think that is such an easy and awesome quick way to do it. You do it from the very beginning when you're writing. You're already breaking apart your story in panels, and you're not even trying. All you're doing is simply putting a dot, writing the action that's going to happen, putting a dot, writing the action that's going to happen, and then when you go back to that, you can sit there and go, shit, I got these dots, it'll break down into these 22 pages. I got my splash pages figured out, it's going to be this and this, and everything will fall into place from here. Now when you get done with this and you're comfortable with this and this is the story you want, and you move on to the rewrite and polish, then what you're going to do, if you're the writer only, if you're the artist, obviously you're gonna just move on right to the sketches, I would imagine, getting your angles, but if you're just the writer only, you can't do that obviously because you're the writer. You're gonna actually need to write a script, an official script. That means that your story is gonna go from, you know, this example into, and this is where the dot thing, in my opinion, becomes very important, because you'll now have to write out a script like this, where, and I've seen some that are different as well, and I don't think this one is exactly how the standard is, because I looked up like the official format and it's slightly different. But for an example, this right off the bat says page 1 is 6 panels, and then it goes down panel 1, and it says it's a wide panel. We see Rick Grimes and his partner Shane ducking out of their place, and then it goes down, it marks, there's a sound effect, and then it goes to panel 2. It's a small panel. Now here's the thing, going back to this, and why I love it so much is you're writing this now. Page 1 is 6 panels. That's the first thing they write in the official polished format. If I just wrote like it was a novel, my rough draft, I'd be lost. I don't know how many pages, I don't know how many panels page 1 is going to be. I'd have to go in there and break it down. But because I did this dot system, I know my page 1 is roughly 5 panels here. My page 2 is roughly 7 panels. And I say roughly because if you polish it, you're like, you know what? I don't need that panel. You break it down to 6. You just make your blocks bigger. Or if you want to shift it around, again, you're free to do that. But now, that's why this is so important, in my opinion, because when you go to put it into the polished format for your artist to read, the actual script for your comic, it's right there. It's a blueprint and it's already right there. You can easily manipulate that to get it to fit just the way you want it, so you get just the right amount of panels, the right amount of images, the right, cliffhanger, the right splash pages. And it's all because when you were writing your rough draft, you were also separating it based on panels. I have this upside down. Alright, this is ridiculously long. I'm going to edit this down. Also, I got other Walking Dead videos coming. There's one that's just taking a little bit of time. There's a lot that's going into it. Also, the link for Dead Living, that's a working title. That is my comic I'm coming out with this year, if all goes well. Link to everything is basically in the description, so go find that. I hope this video helped you out, and if it did, let me know down in that comment box and show support with that like button. And I gotta mention this now, huge thank you. We are at 40,000 subscribers strong, on the road to 100K. I'll talk about that in more detail in a coming video. Alright, thank you guys. Thoughts and opinions in that comment box. I'm done talking. It's your turn. Subscribe now.